Yeah, man. Your question was why was I involved in this drug empire? A motivating factor, if you're the party kingpin.
No, you've sold me. This sounds really dope.
Because I had guys running the ecstasy through strip clubs, and I had striptease dancers running the ecstasy through strip clubs. So they get all the money then from the customers, and then they come to our after parties. So at these after parties, I'd rent like the Hilton Villas in Scottsdale for days on end. People be going around in roller skates and on bicycles, just naked. People putting candle wax on each other. There'd be a jacuzzi on each end, and it was just a really good vibe. We had all these DJs in, never any violence, and you didn't even have to be having sex. People just being cuddle puddles, massaging each other's shoulders, doing the Vicks inhaler thing. Someone just touches your skin, you're on ecstasy, you almost have an orgasm.
What's the Vicks inhaler thing?
So when you're on ecstasy, your senses are heightened to a certain degree. And when you do the Vicks inhaler, it just goes throughout your lungs and you just like have this wave of bliss.
Huh.
You mentioned the stages of success. You're like, hey, at the very beginning, it's a big party. It's fun on the rise. Can you continue on what the rest of that path looks like?
Absolutely. I don't want to glamorize this here. I fear that I may be at risk of doing that so far. Let me make this clear to the audience at this point. My job now is going to schools and scaring the living daylights out of kids with the jail conditions and the consequences of drugs in the hope they won't get involved in drugs and crime. And I also donate books. My book, Hard Time, is about the jail conditions. I've donated 20,000 books in the last couple of years to school kids and prisoners in the hope they won't, do the stupid shit I did. So going more over to the consequences side of it, then you do eventually enter the dark side of drugs, because every time you take drugs, you're always chasing those first highs. First time you do ecstasy, yeah, you have the time of your life. You're dancing all night long. You're telling people your life story, and the next time you do it, the pleasure goes down a little fraction that you don't notice. And in the background, the pain, the side effects, rises a little fraction that you don't notice. And over the years, those curves cross. And if you're addicted, a lot of people do drugs and they'll be fine. But if you've got an addictive personality and you can't stop, when that pain rises above the pleasure, you keep going, even though it's going to lead to the prison, police, or death. Yeah. And I learned that because in the jail, 90% injecting heroin, 2/3 hepatitis C. All the day revolved around getting the drugs in, even though they knew they were going to die. Yellow jaundice skin, teeth rotting out. And that made me ashamed of putting people on the road of drug use. I saw this is the end of that road. This is the horror of what it leads to. Mm-hmm. And I knew I couldn't change my past. So I resolved to just go out and share my story so others wouldn't make my mistakes. So over time, we had a good run. And you start mixing your drugs up to chase those early highs. Mm-hmm. I think there was a newspaper article, they called us the Zec tribe. And that's because we were mixing Xanax and ecstasy and ketamine at one point. Coke and ketamine, we call, like CK, we call that.
Are you writing this down, Taylor?
Yeah, I got it.
Crystal meth. By the time the indictment came down, the prosecutor said most of my co-defendants were chronically addicted to crystal meth, and they didn't have hardly any belongings, a lot of them. So that's how it ends up. And in my book Party Time, there's at the very end of it, it says, where are they now? And nearly all my male friends from back then, one by one, are dead because of the lifestyle choices.
You mentioned you were making. Go ahead, buddy. You mentioned you were making about $500,000 a year before the drug thing off your finance commissions. Is that what I meant? So
that's the stupid thing. I didn't even need to be doing the drugs. I was worth $2 million in the stock market during the .com bubble.
So money wasn't even your motivation for doing the drug thing.
Absolutely
like $500,000 a year. Like some people make more, but that's enough. You're not hurting. You can buy anything you want. Most.
I've written the longest ever book about Escobar. It's over 1,000 pages long. Pablo Escobar's story. I've researched the shit out of his life, and there came a point in time when his brother said, "Look, we're worth billions. Why don't we just buy our own island, kick back? Rival gangsters won't kill us. We won't end up in prison for the rest of our lives. We can live happily ever after, effectively. Pablo Escobar turned around to his brother Roberto and said, you want me to kick back on some boring-ass island, on a deck chair, sipping a margarita? I'm just paraphrasing. And when I'm running a multi-billion-dollar business, when my money puts the president of Colombia in power, when thousands of people are working for me, it's all ego. It is psychological. The lifestyle is more addicting than the cash and the drugs.
That makes sense.
Now you left it, right? I'm sorry, Taylor. Do you want to finish your thought?
No, go for it.
I think I read on your Wikipedia page that you stopped doing the whole party drug thing. Like you left it, and they kind of convicted you, what I'll call from the grave. Like you were done. You closed shop, and they still came after you. Am I right on that?
Yeah. What happened was, I'd met a woman, fallen in love, and she taught me out of it. And I'd quit a year before I got caught. I thought they had to catch you with drugs. They don't. Statute of limitations, Arizona. Anyone from your past within 7 years, if they tell the cops they did a deal with you, they've got you. They've got a witness. Something I forgot to mention about the dark side of drugs then. When Sammy the Bull's crew started to move in, that is when it got really dark. Those people brought in the feds and all the undercovers. They lit the scene up. We saw cars driving around, videoing, cameras, recording license plates, recording people going in and out the clubs, parties. Now, they enticed my top sales guy, Skinner, to a nightclub in Scottsdale under the pretext of doing a drug deal. These were people who, worked for the Bull. And that we found out later on. And they took him into the men's room and knocked his teeth out and took all of his drugs off him. So I moved over 100 miles at that point to Tucson in the Sin Vacas community in the mountains there. And it was a gated, guarded community. To get into that neighborhood, you had to go to the guard and you had to call the house just to let you in. That's how sketchy it got. Because, like I said, I'd structured it like a corporation and I had all the heads of each faction. They were my shield. Mm-hmm. I always told myself, when that shield gets pierced, I'm next.
Yeah,
and that's what happened. The police took down the Bull and his crew, and I'm thinking, thank you, you've just eliminated my competition. But then all those resources that were on the Bull were redirected at me and my crew.
That makes sense.
And that's why you stopped, because you felt like you were about to get caught.
No, I stopped because of multiple reasons. The NASDAQ had crashed. I'd lost a lot of my money, and I was depressed. I met a woman. I was in love with her. She was saying it's so dangerous. You got to stop this.
Was she the woman you married? Same woman from the previous?
No, different one.
Okay.
Sketchy things were happening to my friends, and with all the undercover activity, I had a lawyer, and he said, "Heads up, from the DEA, they're coming after you." And it was a multi-agency task force that came after me. So there was a combination of factors that motivated me to stop. And I was back to trading the stock market online. I'd enrolled in college doing Spanish, and I was trying to be a normal person. We were going to actually move to LA.
You talked about ecstasy being addictive. I don't have any drug experience, really. Is it like... there's addictive, like the internet is addictive, right? Where you just kind of are compelled to do it every day. And then there's withdrawals addictive. What is the ecstasy cycle like, or the lifetime like?
Okay, it's not the drug per se, it's the individual. So most people, over half of young people in this country experiment with drugs, and they'll go on to lead completely normal lives. And the biggest drugs they do in this country, in the UK, is weed, coke, and ecstasy. But there is a minor percent of people who've got addictive personality types. And once they get on that road, they will just self-destruct. They will just keep going. They'll just all out keep going until they self-destruct. And that was the case for me and my co-defendants. I've got an addictive personality type.
Did you bring any ecstasy into prison when you were there? Like have that brought in because you probably still had some remnant connections, or is... you haven't mentioned ecstasy doesn't seem like it would be a prison drug, like more of a rave drug.
I can't imagine the cuddle puddles in prison.
No.
Come on, Rocco.
Before I got arrested, the guards were buying ecstasy off me that they were redistributing in the prison system. Once I got arrested, I was already trying to sever myself from that community. And once I got arrested, I was just fighting for my life then, because the sentence length I was facing, there was no way I was going to bring any drugs in. But once the Woods found out, because there was a newspaper article that said I was, over the years, I'd done more than Sammy the Bull. So once they read that in the prison, in the remand jail, Towers Jail, the Woods, they were like, all right, we know you've got connections. Have your girlfriend bring stuff in through visitation. And I said, look, Alaska. I didn't know how to, respond properly. I said Alaska, and I kept slow playing it. But in the end, those prisoners who were sweating me, they caused a race riot, and they ended up getting moved. So that threat went away. But the